Welcome to Birds of a Feather, the Microcast, where we explore the power of intentional connection. Through the real stories and the practical insights, we uncover how meaningful relationships shape success both in life and in work. And we're here today with one of my all-time favorite people, Faisal Hassan. And Faisal is a thoroughbred champion builder, and he's traveled across the world to give chocolates to me for my wife, whom Faisal, you never met, by the way, because you knew at the time I was taking time away from the family, and we deserve to give her some extra appreciation. So I can't express enough how amazing you are just as a person, as a friend, and also as a leader, right? So Faisal, right now, you're the leader of Avo Automation as the Chief Revenue Officer. You've held VP of Sales titles at LeapWork and Navan. You've led teams and sold massive deals across top-tier software companies like Harness and Splunk and BMC. And my brother, you're an absolute legend.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on this. It's an absolutely pleasure and honor. I support this thing that you're doing. We spoke about this when we met in San Francisco. I think the world has been waiting for something like this, Jeremy, and I'm absolutely excited to be here today.
Sick. I love it. And I know you're traveling all over the world. So where are you tuning in from today?
Literally, I flew in from Dubai, so I'm in the UK now, but I will be going to Texas rather soon. I'm heading over to Dallas rather shortly.
This guy, you've got more frequent flyer miles than I think you could ever know what to do with. It's incredible. Awesome. So, hey, listen, before we get into the deep parts of champion building here, some of the people who are listening might not know you, and they should. Everybody should, and they'll get to know you. But for everyone who's listening out there, maybe Faisal, you could share a little bit about what you're doing today, what you're focused on, and just kind of orient us there.
Yeah, absolutely. So funny enough, Jeremy, we actually had a great QBR yesterday, and our CEO was also on the call. One of the things that was also highlighted to the team, we actually got a lot more new logos last quarter than we did in the entire company history. So shout out to everyone involved, from SCs to solutions engineering to customer success to the reps to the BDRs. But one of the patterns that I've realized, a lot of the team members and one of the key things myself and the leadership team are focusing on, how do we improve on champion building? I think this is one of the key criterias where I know for a fact that it's one of the, think about it, any top rep, you look at three things. Do they know how to build pipeline? Do they know how to build champions? And lastly, how good are they in qualifying deals, qualification? So those three things you look at any top rep. And I do think across the board, from when I looked at the historical data, I think champion building is number one focus for us in the next 2 quarters.
Amazing. It's probably the funnest part of enterprise sales and sales in general. It's really getting to know the people. I don't know if I told you this, Faisal, before almost 15 plus years ago, before I started in software sales, I was an event planner and a wedding planner, and I loved being able to go get to know people and help them realize that moment and just like give them that experience. And I think taking that into software sales, cold calling at the mainframe shops, like, it shook people up a little bit because they expected the, how many seats do you have and can I send you an order form kind of conversation. But as well as everybody, like it changes the game. And it's really fun because you can build lifelong relationships that create opportunity and joy. And yeah, that's awesome.
100%. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So on the topic of champion building, I think maybe where we could start is just exploring how you think about it, right? So from the perspective of work, I know you just mentioned that this is like one of the core tenets for being a great rep, but think about it in all the different layers, right? Because it's not just your customer champions, it's your internal partners, it's your external partners, it's even our family members who are just championing us on the sidelines, make sure that we don't rip our hair out when the deals aren't coming in. So curious to just hear about how do you think about it, Faisal?
Man, so I think champion building is very much a scientific approach. I think there's a lot of psychological aspect of it. It's always about what values are you bringing to this individual constantly, and vice versa. Are you getting value back? Is someone championing you to do something, right? It's a two-way street. If you could think about it. Now, in the customer side, I always look at it from two psychological reasons. Why would someone want to be your champion? And I use this because either someone doing it, either fear or greed. Okay. Fear means if I don't do this, I'm going to lose my job. And that's a dangerous champion to have because they're doing it because their job is on the line and they have to do something. Now, greed, I divide it into three. Someone is doing it because they're either going to get a recognition, a bonus, or promotion. So it's our job to identify which one of these individuals comes into this. A long back, I was reading I heard this podcast, turned out to be, he actually wrote a book. There's a professor called Robert Cialdini, and this guy has 6 principles. And in those, he's saying in order for you to receive something, you have to give something. And that giving something, it's not just anything. I think you have to give something piece of you that's vulnerable, and you share that some piece of you that's so vulnerable, you have that 9-second awkward moment silence. I guarantee you that person is going to share something back. And so unless that person becomes an asshole, but it's not, the reality is, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to have to share something vulnerable to that individual, and that person will share something back with you. And that is when you then identify to say, found that individual. And that person actually want to do something, want to make an impact in the organization. The champions internally comes into deposits, because imagine you're a rep and you hit a deal. You then say, you're getting into the technical aspect of it, and then you realize there's an element missing. Do you have enough credit for you to go to the CTO or the engineering team and say, I really need help to get this deal over the line? What have you done and, interacted with the engineering team, the CTO in your organization, to constantly say, hey, I'm working on this opportunity. I want to keep you guys in the loop, sending them chocolates, doing something, because they never customer facing. They're just behind the scene building the product so you can win more deals. How often do we think about these things? Have we identified think about the power chart that report into the CTO, the key individuals within the internal organization? And same way on a personal side, who in your family members that is that you close to? I think you identify in those 3 elements. That's the way I view it.
Yeah, I love it. I think you're nailing it, right? Like, we do need to earn the right to figure out what their motivation is. And then it's not just about a static one time, hey, like we had a beer, or in your case, maybe we had a pint. And I learned that, you're motivated by this recognition and being the smartest one, smartest engineer, or you've been in this role and that if you do this big project, you're going to win. But like, how do I keep up with that? How do I keep that fresh? How do I understand? Because people are always evolving too, right? And so, it's one of those things where, like, it's not a one-time thing where you check a box. You have to keep putting in the deposits and keep putting in the calories to go and maintain that relationship too.
And that's the thing, Jeremy. If you think about it, I think when you and I spoke, we realized actually we used to compete in we used to compete in 2 different worlds. Where I was working for BMC selling Control M, you were competing against was it CA product?
I was at CA ripping Control M out everywhere I could.
Oh, well, about that.
Might have lost a deal or 2 to Control M, but I'm not going to admit that on the podcast.
That's fine. That's fine. But what I mean is, imagine those champions and those executives that we met throughout those days who made our career where we are today. Right now, I can name you 11 individuals who made an impact in my career during my time at BMC. 11 individuals. And some of these are in a very large organizations like H&M and so forth. And these people have made a significant, I think we closed a $5 million deal with them. And so these individuals made a huge impact in my career. Now, I wish if I could go back and even right now, to just say, hey, I just want to let you know I moved from Stockholm to Denmark, and then now I moved to London and so forth. I wish I had kept in contact with them, because it's been such almost a decade since I've worked there. And for me to just call him up and said, hey, it's been 10 years, how are you? It doesn't work that way. So I
Yeah.
think we have to start thinking about, how do we deposit these little things? And it doesn't have to be something big, but just check in upon them to say, I just wanted to let you know I read this news around H&M are doing an expansion into a new market. I hope you're doing well. I just want to also let you know, on a personal side, I have now moved to a different country and so forth. Something so simple. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible if you just keep up with people, and it starts to get really difficult because, especially as you progress in your career, at a certain point we start to shed relationships, but we still rely on relationships every single day for our success, right? I mean, it just is. But it's really easy when you think about how many we need to keep up with and nurture. And at some point, like, we have, the 10, 15, 20 we're working with right now. So it's a lot easier because we're in active contact with them. But then there's this long tail of all these amazing people who have made an impact in our life that, like, if we can just have that nudge, or that, like, hey, don't forget about that person, and just make an easy outreach. I think that we can create a lot of continuity and joy and opportunity in life, but it's easy to let all the connections slip, and we've all done it. I know I'm guilty of that for sure. And it's whether it's a fault of our own, letting it slip, or usually it's mutual, right? Like, it's not usually just one person, because the phone works two ways.
Absolutely.
But I'd be curious to know if any story around, a contact that you care about that was, like, really important to you, you let slip, or you felt like it, hey, that stands out, and how that's shaped you.
I think there's quite few, but I don't think it's personally slipped. I think a lot of times we think about that. Someone say the most powerful things is to build a relationship. I believe sometimes the most powerful thing is to rebuild relationships. But you know what I mean? Rebuild, because these individuals have been in your life for a while. And so I feel like that, at least during my time at Splunk, I was constantly traveling a lot. I think a lot. What I mean is, from every Sunday till Thursday, I was on a plane for about 10 hours from Dubai to South Africa. And I did this for, I think, 9 months or 10 months.
Wow.
For a long time. And during that time, I got exposed to the culture, the people, and so forth, and executives, C-levels. And these C-levels, I think I can name 4 of them that literally made an impact in my life. And out of these 4, it's sad to say I kept in contact with one of them throughout. But this individual shaped a lot in my career, without a doubt. He now moved from South Africa. Now he lives in Australia with his family. But the story and the struggle and the toughness we went through together to get to where they are as an organization and where Splunk got to. Those things are so impossible to think about, because there's a lot of emotionals, there's a lot of things that we had to fix on both companies that we got together. But I do wish I had kept up with the other executives. I know one of them also moved to London, and I literally just found out today because he posted things on LinkedIn, and I'm like, does he not live in South Africa? And I just checked, and I realized he actually lives in London now. And I was like, I should bloody message him. Tell him, let's go for a cup of coffee or a breakfast. And so then again, Jeremy, imagine it's been 5 years, 6 years since I connected with this individual. So I think I wish I'm going to have to change these little things that we spoke about. It's so tough because you're busy in your day-to-day life. You have your job, you have your family, you have all these things that you're doing in real life. How are you meant to keep up with every single important people that has crossed your path, whether they made an impact on a personal level or business level, professionally? So I genuinely think I would want to change that personally myself and just look back and say, who should I reach out to? What are the small things that I can do personally? And talking to you now, and even what Feather stands for, it made me realize, why am I not doing this? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's simple, but it's also yet so difficult.
Yeah. What do you think is what makes it difficult for you?
There's a lot of things. So one is the not knowing, when am I supposed to message that individual? And then how often are they coming to your mind? Because right now, as we speak, there's messages that's coming in regarding work, regarding, oh, don't forget, it's your uncle's birthday coming up this weekend. What are we supposed to get him? So there's a constantly things, rocks that's blocking you from having. If you had an hour or 2 hours of your day just to think about and say, I'm just going to dedicate this to think about, who shall I reach out to in my past? What are the 1 or 2 or 3 things I can give them or say to them? I think it's time that's blocking it.
Yeah. It's time's a doozy. And if you figure out how to make 48 hours in a day, we should quit our jobs and start selling that, because that's that would be awesome.
Exactly.
But it is partially that, and its organization and its signal. And at least in my estimation is like, I find that especially like when I first started really thinking about Feather, it was on Father's Day, and I was sending out all these messages to people that were important to me at some point in my life. Some of them might not have even heard from me in over 10, 15 years. But what was really amazing is that I would get messages back from them the next holiday, right? So like, even though now a quarter, 2 quarters go by, it's New Year's, I'm getting a message, and I'm like, and it feels really good because people are actually taking the time. And so if you just make those little deposits, even just that like, hey, here's a good memory I have, or I wanted to thank you for something that you did or an impact that you made, and you just pay it forward in terms of appreciation. That is like, I mean, whether or not we recognize it, it could change someone's whole day, and then that has a cascading impact on everybody else around them too. So I think that whether it's an hour or even just 5 minutes once a week, if we can all find that time, it'll be great. And I'd love to maybe kind of think about, like, so I know you do this really well, and I'm almost like scared to ask you for your favorite, because I feel like the answer is going to be like, I got tons. But if I ask you to give us a story about your favorite champion, or somebody that you felt you did a great job with? Doesn't matter if it's in work or outside of work, Faisal. What comes to mind?
Okay, so there's 2, and I hope to give you the both. One of them turned out to be, well, one of them was a champion from the customer side, and one of them happened to be within work. So we'll start with the customer. Remember how I said one of the champions I have kept relationship with going back and forth in South Africa? So obviously he's a C-level, and I don't think I can mention his name out of it. Let's just keep his name out of it. But one of the things, and he happened to also be the EV, but reporting into the board, right? So he's a C-level. And I never forget this moment when we were so close. When you're so close in signing a deal, because you've done your teams have done all the due diligence, they worked with his team, and you're getting to that last point. But what comes next, Jeremy? Paper process and legal, and try to get that over the line. So there's a lot of these emails that's going back and forth between the lawyers, and it becomes like a pissing content. Literally, you've seen it, right? So
the legal arm wrestling is hilarious sometimes.
That's exactly it. So the reality was, him and I are copied onto these email, and we have each other on WhatsApp. And I'm like, dude, are you seeing this? And he's laughing, and he's like, yes. Who you betting on? And I'm like, none. But do you think we can get this over the line? And he said, yes. Why don't you suggest to get on a call, all of us? I'll join, you join, right? So we can just get this over the line. And so when we got on the call, I kid you not, it was 10 p.m. and it lasted till midnight, just before midnight, so we can get this over the line. I think it was 11:30 p.m. And during this whole time, they were going back and forth. And him and I are just saying, this is taking the piss on WhatsApp. And then I then said to him, stop. What do you need to get this done? And I tell you what I need to get this done. And so he said, accept that clause. This is okay for us. If you can convince your guy, I'll convince my guy. I kid you not. We said, guys, why don't we take 5-minute break? You guys talk, we talk. Within 5 minutes, they both came together and said, yes, we agree to this. You guys can have this. If we end up closing it. So, yeah. So, and he was so, because he was so worried because of the timeline, because I said to him, we really need this before midnight. And he jumped on the call at 10 p.m. and he was the EB. He just needed legal to go through it to make sure that they gave him the green light. In that very moment, you realize this is more than just a champion. And he became such a good, close friend. I can call him friend, and his assistant and his team are like a family to me. I kid you not, like some of the best people you ever meet in your life. And so one of the great guys, so now he lives in Australia with his family by the beach, still works for the same organization, but just happened to move there. But it's just one of those stories that if those deposits that you talk about, if we haven't made those deposits early on, there's a lot of vulnerabilities that he knew about me, my family, my life. I knew a lot about him, his family, and all of that sort of thing. And I don't think that deal would have happened with an EV. You tell him, should we just jump on a call at 10 p.m. to squash this out so we can get this deal over the line? It wouldn't have happened, for sure not.
Yeah. It's, when you know, but it does take a lot of upfront investment, right? To go and get that relationship and nurture that relationship to point of trust.
Yeah.
And so when you think about like what you actually did, how long did it take? What were you doing? And how, because you can't just go and get somebody's phone number and text them like, hey, can you go and, stiff arm your legal team and hopefully they'll respond well to it, right? You got to earn that. So
no, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of groundwork that you had to do. I mean, think about those 9 months almost. People, you know how COVID changed the game and having these virtual meetings, right? I still believe in person. When someone physically sees you every day, that in-person connection, I always say it's not what happens in the meeting room. It's what happens when you're going towards the meeting room and when you leave that meeting room. Those little minutes. And then even when you then, after work, you disconnect, not talk about work, but you genuinely connect with the individual, how they view life, their values. You connect with them, try to understand, because it's a different culture. South Africa has their own different culture than anywhere else, right? Just appreciating them and their culture. And the other thing is that how much value am I bringing him for him to read on? And this C-level wasn't just any C-level. He was hands-on. I kid you not. He's so technical. He's like, I'll do the POC myself. I let my team do it, but independently, I also want access to this. And I start freaking out. I'm like, either this is gonna break the deal, or it's gonna accelerate it. And you're like, do you really want to risk it?
Yeah. Talk about rolling the dice on that one.
Exactly.
I'm with you, and I actually, I mentioned this on a recent podcast we did too, that a stat around it takes over 200 hours of in-person effort, like being together, right? You could go to the office and you could be remote, but like actually investing in each other in person, whether it's playing a sport after work or going to have a cup of coffee, giving a friend a hug, a high five, or, that's what really makes a difference. And, I was going to wrap this up by asking you one actionable takeaway, but you kind of hit on it, which is like get in person. But maybe like if we could go a little bit deeper into that. So like if what your experience has been building champions, some great champions takes that, I have to be in person. Hey, like the water cooler talk as we're walking down the hallway, like, hey, what's a real problem you're trying to solve after you walk out of a meeting and do a first meeting deck presentation? How do you go manage the in-person, and what's one takeaway for whether it's reps or people, or, even if you're trying to go hire people, like how do you go manage getting in person? And what are some of the things that you think about that we can implement into our day there?
Oof. That's a very tough one. But Jeremy, when you think about it, it comes down to the emotional intelligence, the EQ level. Are you able to emotionally connect with another individual? Emotionally connect with them, whatever that might be. I'll give you an example. You know that chocolate that I've given you? I've actually given that anyone who knows me, every executive, have actually had that chocolate. And where I got that chocolate from, as I told you, it's actually from Ireland. And the story behind it, right? It's so powerful to me when I lived in Ireland and I came across this family who built it. It's something so personal, but has a storyline to it and has a vulnerability. It breaks the ice and you're giving them something that you personally have got for them. And it kind of opens up a situation where what do they actually want? Where do they see their life? And you're not really focused so much about work. Those little nuggets that gets thrown at you during that moment you have that conversation with someone, whether you're walking in a hallway with them and you're giving them the chocolate, or whether whatever you're giving them, right? Something so personal. Those little elements that they tell you throughout, you remember it, but don't just forget it, because straight away I usually take up my phone and I start writing these bullet points that he said it to me during that hallway, or she said it to me. And in those little moments, I then remember as a follow-up, hey, you mentioned you're excited about your daughter's going to, a football school.
Yeah.
Which one is that? And those little things, they were like, you remember it? So those little elements make so much more impact. And after the meeting, they then tell you, hey, what we spoke about during the hallway, I want to continue having this conversation. And it often leads to, can we go for a pint? Can we go for a meal or a coffee? And you can for a little bit longer. 99% of the times that happens, Jeremy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's about following up with it.
Yeah. So if I could paraphrase how I'm interpreting this, it's like you got to give a piece of yourself. So what that is, the chocolates for you is going to be different for me. Although I love some good chocolate too. But it's going to be a different thing for me, or for Mark Sahlberg, who does, cupcakes and gives, that's his thing. Right.
True.
You got to find that piece of you, and what is that special piece of you, and then be able to then tie that back to what's important to that person, and actually show genuine interest. And
Right.
when you break that down and you're vulnerable and you show interest, what I'm hearing you say is write it down. Because if you don't write it down, it's really easy to forget. And it's not just easy to forget from getting a reminder about it, but just because we have so much going on, and like you mentioned, we lack so much time. Write it down. Right. I mean, all of these things, whether it's, putting the time in person, or, making sure that you have dedicated time to even think and process these different things about these people, or constantly making the deposits and trying to figure out from a greed standpoint, like what makes people tick, and aligning the value to them. All of this is, bottling that up is what's made you great, and the greats out there really world class. And relationships are the core of all success, both in health and in business. So Faisal, I thank you for these amazing insights, man. It's been great. Everything you're talking about is kind of masterclass in champion building and relationship development, and the stories you've shared, they illustrate why, like, when we're deliberate and when we care, we put in the effort, right? It makes such a big difference. And so everyone else who's out there listening, if you've got ideas and, would love to know what's your chocolate, right? Like, how do you go about doing it? And how are you intentional? And share some of the thoughts that you might have in the comments. We'd love to keep the conversation going. And of course, little shameless plug at the end. If anyone's interested in checking out Feather, you can head over to www.feather.vip. And we're building a relationship management platform that helps you be intelligent and actionable and accountable. And we'd love to get your thoughts on it. My name's Jeremy. This has been Birds of Feather. Looking forward to catching you next time.